I'm Coach K of Teen Pulse here with Isaac Littlejohn Eddy talking about his Blue Man experience. If you haven't caught part 1 yet, click this link, watch it, and then meet us back here. So Isaac, what would you say is one of the most exciting aspects about what you do?
I think the most exciting aspects of what I do is when there's something new that I have to learn for either for performance or some other challenge outside of Blue Man. Because outside of Blue Man, I also do a lot of cartooning and animation and other performances, and I like to lecture and I like to workshop with students and things. And so within Blue Man and outside of Blue Man, the most exciting thing is once I feel like I've kind of have a good understanding of everything that I'm doing and I fall into everything's within a good comfort zone, and I'm still pushing myself each night, but it just kind of is riding along like that. And then there's a new challenge that comes up, and my first question is I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be able to do it, you know. And with the show, it could be like there's new music in the show, and there's a part that's really hard, and I have to really woodshed and practice and make sure that I can do it before I actually go into the show. Or if it's outside of the show, like if I'm asked to do a workshop with college students or asked to do a lecture that's longer than normal. And so when I reach these new challenges and I apply myself and have to work at to make sure that I actually can succeed. And then when I do the performance and I've done the work with the new music and then I can do it well in the performance, it feels so great to realize that my brain is still this growing organism, and that it's not this kind of stale, kind of atrophying thing. So that's definitely the thing that's the most exciting for me, is to find new challenges and then to overcome them.
Awesome. So then how often do you practice?
So with Blue Man, it's a lot like with other forms of drumming and other forms of music, period. Your performance doesn't count as practice, you know. So even though I perform 6 or 7 shows a week and I'm drumming for a lot of that performance, and because I've been doing it for 9.5 years, I have much better confidence with tempo and with my own rhythm and with kind of syncopated stuff, and being able to subdivide rhythmically and to be able to do separate rhythms with both hands and everything. I feel much more confident about that. But in the end, just doing the performance doesn't cut it. If you just did the performance, it's kind of diminishing returns. You don't become a better drummer at the end of the week by just doing performance. You have to do the building block practices outside of the show before you can kind of do well in the show. And so for me, it really comes down to getting back to the metronome. And some weeks I'm bad and I don't practice a lot, but I try to do 20-minute sessions with the metronome, just really slow work, just to make sure that I'm still with proper metered time, because you can kind of make up your own time sometimes, and it can become a dangerous thing. So just getting back to the metronome and always pushing myself to learning new rhythms and to learning stuff that's outside of the realm of the show, so that I can do the stuff in the show with ease.
That's excellent advice right there. Now, how do you get yourself in the zone before a performance?
A lot of it comes down to connecting with what I was saying before about kind of making the connections with the other people on stage. We have a pretty extensive sound check before the show, and that's a time for us to be able to catch up with, like literally just chat with the band members and the crew members and the Blue Men. But more importantly, it's to check to make sure that all the instruments are sounding properly for the show, and also to get into the musical mind space of where the 6 of us know that we're kind of working together and performing together. So it starts there, and then after that, there's this chunk of time where we're getting into makeup and getting into costume, and that's there's a lot of talk about mask acting being this being a ritual, and the act of putting on the makeup, the act of putting on the mask is also the act of getting into the character. And that doesn't necessarily mean that once we have all the makeup on that we're totally Blue Men, but the space within the dressing room is a really almost like a sacred space. It's this place where we're really that's where all the stuff begins. That's where the show begins. And if you pop your head in, you could probably be like, well, they just look like three dudes joking around and with wardrobe, and people are coming in and coming out. It just looks pretty normal to me. But for us, that's where we're getting into a space of play and a space of like listening to each other and getting a vibe of where we're at that day and what we're going to bring to stay on stage. And that comes with the actual conversations about what we want to do in the show that night, but it also comes from the nonverbal things of just like having fun with one another. And so that's the main thing. It's helpful a lot of times to do my own warm-ups, to do my own stretching, and to prepare myself mentally. There's sometimes at some parts of the show that I get really nervous about. So I like to just take myself out of the room with the other Blue Men and just find a little corner and do what's called it's an old acting technique, but it's used in sports too. Just like positive imagery. Mm-hmm. Instead of going to the fear and fearing what's going to happen if I mess up. Instead, just taking a short moment, close my eyes, and imagine the success, like what it means to do well, and to just like the power of a smile. You know, if you fear that something's going to go wrong, and you just allow yourself to get drawn down into that dark place, into that frown, that can create your reality. You know, and instead, if you just sit and imagine it going well, and just that brightness and that lightness, and seeing the audience just to be so impressed with what you three are doing on stage. That often can guide you towards that finish line as well. So
definitely,
that's how I get in the zone.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I know you were talking a little bit about the wardrobe process, and I know everyone out there is wondering, is it a mask, is it paint? Tell us a little bit about the process of getting blue.
It's a bald cap and old school clown makeup, but it's a little bit more extensive than that, just because of we allow, basically what I mean is the time that we allow for us to get into costume is relatively long when you compare it to other shows. And that's because it's not just the act of putting on the makeup itself, it's also the act of getting into the character. And we don't want to rush it, you know? So that's what it comes down to. That's why we give ourselves that chunk of time.
Do you think that all performers would benefit from that extensive process of getting into character?
I do, definitely. I mean, there's only so much, especially before the day that you're performing, that actual day, there's only so much you can do in terms of technically preparing, because the practice before is what is going to come out in the performance. So you can't just like go over your part before you get into the competition or into the performance, because in the end that can really that you're coming out a little bit at a loss, you know, because you've spent all this energy doing the performance. What I think is better before is warming up, you know, and getting limber and getting into a space of play, even if the performance is something really serious, like very, very dark and very heavy. I feel like the space of play is really important, even with that, because play, people kind of don't give, like, just having fun with your friends and joking around and messing around, people think is just messing around, when really it's allowing your brain to accept these alternate realities. That's what joking is you are pretending that the world is something other than it's not, and you're able to look from all these different perspectives, and that gets your place in this limber space that is able for you to inhabit that dark, heavy, serious space for the performance. So I think it's really important to do that.
With theatrical insight, that's a very powerful tool. Thank you. Now, looking back, what advice would you give your teenage self?
Well, the first thing is, I remember in high school thinking that any kind of performance that I did, whether it be theater or music, was just small time, that it wasn't like the big leagues, and it wasn't professional, and I took it really seriously. I had a lot of fun and I got really nervous, but in the end it didn't matter, basically. Mm-hmm. And when I look at it now, I think about all the stuff that I did with my classmates in high school, and so much of it is so much more intense and hardcore and harder than what I do now. Like just theater, these plays that if I was asked to do it right now, I don't even know if I could do it. I don't even know if I could, if I would have the time to memorize all the lines and to remember the blocking and do it all. And so just to remember that in high school, even though it's not a professional, supposed professional thing, that it's a really big deal, that and that it's not like the older that you get and the professional people would be able to easily do it. It's really hard what you're doing, and it's really commendable. So that's the first thing that I would tell my high school self. And then I think the second thing would be, even though I did kind of challenge myself, and I did a lot of different things. I played lacrosse, and I was in theater and doing music and doing art and stuff. I think I would challenge myself to push myself further with a couple of those things, because I had a lot of fun with many different things, and I think it's good to multidisciplinary work is very important, I think, but I think it's also great to be able to focus on one or two things and to really take that to the next level and really push yourself hard with that stuff. And I didn't do that with music in high school, and I wish I did.
Well, you've caught up for it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So the mission of Teen Pulse is to teach social responsibility through the arts. And I wondered if you would share some of your thoughts on that.
I think about that a lot, like what is our social responsibility as artists? And I think what it comes down to is, if you are a person who is privileged enough to be able to do any kind of art. And what I mean by that is there's so many people in our country, but also especially in the world, that are that their lives are filled with survival. That's the only thing that they can think about, is staying alive, making sure they have food, making sure their families have food. That even on education alone is something that's not even possible, or that is the privilege in and of itself. So to remember that if you're in any position thinking about the arts, already you're leagues above many parts of the world. And so to think of yourself as privileged. And I know that's a lot of people don't think of themselves as privileged, even if they are, in a drum corps group or doing art in other ways. And once you realize that you're so privileged compared to many other people in the world, that with that privilege there comes a responsibility. And what do you want to do with that privilege? And how can you give back? How can you kind of even the playing field a little bit? Just even just the distribution of wealth in the world, or just the distribution of resources. And this doesn't mean that, again, that every piece of work you have to do, piece of artwork you have to do, has to literally solve these social problems. But if you bring that awareness into your work, it will inform it and it will make it better. And that starts with the students in our country, and if they put their energies with that, then good things can come of it.
I absolutely agree, Isaac, and thank you for chatting with me and for sharing your insight with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Skye. It's been a pleasure.
If you would like to learn more about Isaac and what he does, you can visit isaaclittlejohneddy.com or blueman.com. This has been Coach K, the founder of Teen Pulse, with Blue Man Isaac Eddy. Keep doing what you love, and you can be our next artist success story.